everyone, welcome back to our creative writing class. Today we will tackle about poetry writing process. Again, this is your teacher in creative writing, Mrs. Jessa C. Miyage. After going through this lesson, you were expected to first, write a short poem applying the various elements and literary devices, exploring innovative techniques. Second, use some of the learned elements, techniques, and literary devices. And third, appreciate literary pieces written by local and foreign writers. Identify your writing preferences. Directions. Knowing your writing preferences will help you be more successful in your writing process. To determine your idiosyncratic writing preferences, answer the following questions on your paper. First, when do you like to write? Where do you like to write? Second, what writing tools, for example, paper, pens, pencils, laptop, dictionary, thesaurus, etc., do you need to write a document? Third, what genres do you prefer to write and why? Fourth, how do you write your first draft? Are you a think-write writer or a write-write writer? Fifth, what stages of the writing process do you use? Which are your strengths and which are your weaknesses? Is experimental writing a workmanship or a specialty? Obviously, the discussion will never wrap up. Yet, I do not accept that it is both. In this manner, it is something unique of a craftsmanship and an art. Disregard definition. Utilize your own imagination and locate your own one-of-a-kind importance of experimental writing. Someone said that scholars have a blessing, particularly innovative essayists. Creative writers have the ability to engage somebody to make somebody snicker, to make somebody cry, to make somebody think. In any subject, ideas must be comprehended by models. Fiction, verse, and true life are altogether instances of exploratory writing. We'll see them in detail in future portions of this arrangement. For the time being, we should perceive what establishes experimental writing. Every author has his or her own inclinations when drafting a record, regardless of whether an individual is composing a story, a sonnet, a diary, a passage, a letter, or an innovative genuine piece. The composing approach is peculiar, implying that it is particular to the individual who is composing. Some are think-composed journalists. They have to think and figure some more until they can compose their first draft. At a point when they can compose their first draft, they need a huge square of time to get it down on paper. Their first draft feel like a completed item to the essayist, since they've done the greater part of their pre-writing and updating in the reasoning procedure. In any case, these scholars need to recollect that a primary draft is only that, a first draft. Modification is fundamental. Advantages: once they've started writing, they finish their draft easily. Second, the first draft can feel like a polished final draft to the writer. They usually finish drafts on time or earlier than the deadline. Disadvantages: they need time to think. They can't write under command or time pressure. Starting the opening paragraph can be difficult because they're still thinking. Another is revising their work is difficult because from their perspective, A lot of the revision decisions were made in the thinking process. The writing process. Every piece of writing goes through a process of stages. Pre-writing, also sometimes called planning, drafting, cooling, revising, and publishing. These steps do not always follow one another in succession. Instead, they are recursive, meaning a step can occur again at any point in the process. For instance, while revising an historically based short story, a writer may discover he or she needs to do additional research about the time period that the story is set, which takes the writer back to the pre-writing stage. Let's talk about pre-writing or planning stage. This is the stage where the writer thinks of the possible concept or the other ideas. Conceptualizing helps to determine the flow of the write-up. Some writers keep a composing diary, a record of records and notes, possibly drawings or photos, that at first grab their eye. Authors by and large are solid eyewitnesses who record what they see, hear, taste, contact, and smell, since it might turn out to be a piece of a story, a sonnet, a true-to-life article, a play, and so on. Scholars may convey a little journal with them for the duration of the day and set it on the end table close to their bed around evening time. At that point, it is promptly accessible when a thought, a motivation catches their eye. Writers make several decisions in the pre-writing stage as well. They will answer questions like the topic, readers or audience, the mode of delivering the context, genre, the point of view on how to tell the content, and some factual information. Let's proceed with conceptualizing or drafting. Drafting includes composing the primary draft of a report. A few journalists compose their first draft with a pen and a notepad. Different essayists compose legitimately on a PC or PZ. The decision relies upon the inclination of the essayist. A short bit of composing can be drafted at a time. The objective is to get everything down on paper before it is lost. On the off chance that a piece can't be drafted at a time since it is excessively long, scholars for the most part stop at a spot where they recognize what they will compose straight away. This forestalls a mental obstacle, the powerlessness to compose the following day. When drafting, writers are urged to not focus on spelling, accentuation, language structure, and so on. Re-examining while at the same time composing makes essayists lose the first progression of the thought. Spelling, accentuation, language structure, and so on can be tended to in the last update. Next stage is revitalizing. Time plays an important part in writing. Once you create your draft, you need to have some break for you to unwind your mind in conceptualizing. This will help you to rethink and reconceptualize for new possible content or inputs. This allows writers to have a new perspective when entering the revision stage. To do this, journalists should be sorted out and time supervisors. The main draft must be done early enough to save it for the suggested cooling time. Writers of books have significantly longer cooling periods. It might be weeks, months, and here and there even years, contingent upon the author's inclination and the cutoff time for the distribution of the book. Revising. Revising literally means to see again, not just once but multiple times. Revision is two types of processes, where the larger problems such as content and organization and the smaller problems such as sentence structure, word choice, and formatting shall both be considered in revising your output. Revising will help you to notice the other elements of your write-up from the mechanics, structure, coherence of the paragraphs, and its core. Some portion of updating may incorporate requesting that others read drafts and make modification proposals. Eventually, it's consistently up to the author whether those update suggestions will be actualized into the last draft. The last stage of the writing process is publishing. Publishing involves submitting final manuscripts to editors of print and online journals and magazines, newspapers, or publishing companies. Although it's great to see one's name in print, not all writers write for publication. Some write their stories, poems, letters, diaries, etc. for the next generations, their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. They write to record their personal history. Questions to ponder. Have you tried to follow the writing process? How was it? Among the phases of the writing process, which is hard for you? How do you surpass it? Tips in creative writing, writing a poem. Knowing that after taking this module or lesson, you will be writing your own well-crafted poem considering the elements, techniques, and devices presented. You have also to decide the form of the poetry, the diction, tone, and other essential elements that you have learned in the previous modules or lessons. Learning how to write a poem is debatably one of the hardest forms of creative writing to master. There are so many rules, but at the same time, no rules at all. That's according to Cater in 2019. Despite the challenge, writing poetry is a very fulfilling creative venue, and we have exactly what you're looking for to learn how to nail this art form. Because poetry is so specific to the artist, knowing how to write a poem in your own way can be tricky. Cater had given several benefits of writing a poem. Fundamentals for how to write a poem. Poetry can be subjective. Not every poem will speak to every person. That being said, there are different attributes that you should learn if you want to know how to write poetry well regardless. Select the form of your poem. The structure of a poem can refer to many different things, but we're going to discuss some different forms of poetry, how to use punctuation, and last words. Form of a poem. The form of your poem is the physical structure. It can be requirements for rhyme, line length, number of lines or stanzas, etc. Here are different types of poetry forms that we have discussed in the previous lessons. Sonnet is a short rhyming poem of 14 lines. Haiku, a poem of 3 lines where the first is 5 syllables, the middle is 7 syllables, and the last is 5. Acrostic, a poem where the first letter of each line spells a word that fits with the theme of the poem or exposes a deeper meaning. Couplet, this can be a part of a poem or stand alone as a poem of 2 lines that rhyme. Free verse, this type of poem doesn't follow any rules and is free written poetry by the author. Most of the poets have explicitly less experienced ones compose what's called free stanza, which is a sonnet without a structure, or with a structure the writer has compensated for that particular piece. The writer may choose to have a specific rhyme conspire, or may make their sonnet syllabic. With a free refrain sonnet, you can set up any topic or example you wish, or have none by any means. The extraordinary thing about verse is that you can even begin with a particular sonnet structure and afterward decide to adjust it so as to make it special and your own. Poetry punctuation. Writing a poem is difficult because you never know what the appropriate punctuation is, because it can be different from punctuation when writing a book. This means you use punctuation properly for every grammar rule. If you remove the lines and stanzas, it would work as a grammatically correct paragraph, and this even includes writing dialogue in your poem. Moreover, it implies you use accentuation to serve the manner in which you might want the sonnet to be perused. A comma shows a brief delay, a period demonstrates a more drawn out respite, a scramble demonstrates an interruption with an association of contemplations. Utilizing no accentuation at all would loan to a surged feeling which you may need. Your accentuation decisions will rely upon your objectives when composing a sonnet. Sealer of your poem. The last word of a line, the last word of your poem, and the last line of your poem are very important. These are the bits that echo in your reader's head and have the most emphasis. The use of the imageries. The use of the imagery as a literary device in your writing consists of descriptive language that can function as a way for the reader to better imagine the world of the piece of literature and also add symbolism to the work. Imagery draws on the five senses, namely the details of taste, touch, sight, smell, and sound. Imagery can also pertain to details about movement or a sense of a body in motion, or the emotions or sensations of a person, such as fear or hunger. Using imagery helps the reader develop a more fully realized understanding of the imaginary world that the author has created. Taste. The familiar tang of his grandmother's cranberry sauce reminded him of his youth. Sound. The concert was so loud that her ears rang for days afterward. Sight. The sunset was the most gorgeous they'd ever seen. The clouds were edged with pink and gold. Smell. After eating the curry, his breath reeked of garlic. Touch. The tree bark was rough against her skin. The association of sound devices. The use of the auditory effect on your piece will also give aesthetics to your piece, not just the physical outlook of the piece, but also on how to sound it when the reader reads the piece. It gives additional impact to the reader and let him to remember it. The use of figures of speech like alliteration, assonance, consonants, onomatopoeia, rhyme and rhythm will surely help you to utilize sound aesthetic well. Tell and express the feelings. Structure, imagery, and sound work together to make up the technical excellence of a poem. But if your words are empty of a deeper meaning, what's the point in writing a poem at all? According to Brooks Washington, poetry is a form of storytelling. The key to writing is making the audience feel, give them something to remember and hold on to. Numerous new scholars look onto buzzwords and tired points, meaning keep the similar sounding word usage, for their sonnets, since they imagine that is what they should do. In any case, copying something another person has done, or some thought of what you should figure a sonnet ought to be about, won't give you a certified passionate piece that others can interface with. So compose the sonnet that no one but you can compose. Considering at your own experiences will help you to establish your thought and emotions. What do you know? Since your experiences may be the first sources of a concept, it will be easy for you to tell and share. Where could be the writers of stories and poems, composers of songs gather thoughts? As you learn in literature that personal experiences could be the substantial source of the concepts. As a writer, all you need to do is to transfer the concepts into words. Can you make that feeling an image other people can see through your words? That is the poem you write. Do not be ordinary. Be unique to stand out. There are many cliches you want to avoid when writing poetry. Nothing really marks an amateur poet like cliches. The temptation, avoid cliche phrases. Go line by line and make your language as crisp and original as you can. If there are pieces in your poem that seems like you've read or heard them before, try to reword it in order to make it more original. If your poem seems long-winded to you, imagine what that would be like for your reader. Be ready to edit your poem to get it down to its best form. According to Abigail Giroir, poetry is just word math. Every piece means something, and there can be any extraneous bits, otherwise it gets confusing. It just becomes a puzzle made out of all the words that make you feel something. Enhancing your poem using the writing cycle. The genuine enchantment of verse occurs in the re-examining and refining. Amend the ever-lining hell out of it. To summarize an old educator of mine, don't be reluctant to sit with it for a considerable length of time, months, years, as long as the sonnet needs. It is incredible to have composing objectives in courses of events, yet don't search a sonnet before you know it's prepared. Avoid abstractions. A word that can just allude to an idea or feeling, it is anything but a solid, unmistakable thing. A few instances of this are freedom, love, servitude, hostility. Reflections make each individual picture something other than what's expected. So they are powerless words and they will debilitate your sonnet. Rather than utilizing a reflection, consider what symbolism you can use to pass on that feeling or idea. Freedom can become chains breaking or winged creatures flying. Love can be acquiring your life partner espresso bed, petting a canine, cleaning a headstone. Think about the best pictures to pass on your concept of that deliberation so every purchaser can be on the same wavelength with you. Try not to categorize yourself into a structure that will smother your inventiveness. Use symbolism and sound. Have an importance and reason for each sonnet and change until your fingers drain. Final questions. Which of the following tips in writing of a poem do you really consider? Can you follow these tips in writing your own poem? So our lesson ends here, and I hope that you will find this tip suitable for your preferences in writing your poems. And if you want to reread and restudy this lesson while you're drafting your poem, feel free to do so. Thank you so much for participating, and as always,